right, hi everybody, welcome to part 2 of the morphing tutorial. So what we are going to do in this is we're actually going to go ahead and download the Illustrator file that I have linked for you. So this file is going to be full of shapes, and we are going to go ahead and add those to a library. And for this tutorial, we are actually going to not morph the shapes, but we're going to make it look like we morphed the shapes. All right, so let's see here. So this is the file that I want you to go ahead and download. Go ahead and download that. You are going to extract that and go ahead and open that up. So it looks like it comes with an AI file, so you might as well just open that one up since that's what we're using as Illustrator. Okay, the project's gonna pop up here like such. We are gonna add some of these assets to the library, to a library. So you can do whatever you like. If you want to start a new one, that's totally up to you. I am not gonna start a new one. I'm just gonna use one of my other libraries. I was using Fruit for the color swatches before, so I'll just keep adding to this particular library. So for the first thing is that all of these wonderful shapes are grouped together. And what we wanna do is go ahead and ungroup those. So I'm gonna select the main group here, and I'm gonna go to Object, Ungroup. Now everybody's solo. I do kind of like this chalky black. It's not the blackest black, but it's close. So I'm going to just leave the color as is. And I'll choose a light background in After Effects when we get into there and start morphing things. So I'm going to use this kind of floral geometric shape. I'm going to drag and just drop it into my library here. I'm going to use the pyramid. You can use whatever you like. And then I'm going to use this shape. And I'm using these three because they're the most different from all the other shapes. These can be used, but they're all fairly similar in how they look. So I think these three shapes will be the most interesting to transform. All right, so you can either save this or close it and don't save it. It's totally up to you. I'm just going to minimize it for now. So in After Effects for this morphing project, we left off here with this particular GIF. Let's go ahead and do a new composition. I'm just going to call this Shapes. 600 by 600 pixels, 24 frames a second, and then 5 seconds is fine. So here it is. I'm going to go to Layer, and we're going to do a new solid. I am going to choose, how about this orange background? It'll be a nice contrast for those objects. All right, so what I want to go ahead and do is add these shapes on to here, and then I'm going to kind of scale them so they're all about the same size. They're all the same size now from the Illustrator file, so since they're all about the same size, I'm going to select all of them over here, Shift Select, hit my S key, and I'm going to scale them all up at the same time just to save myself a little bit of time. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut the visibility off of it doesn't really matter what order these are in at all. I'm going to kind of move this so that the circle is looking a little bit more centered. And we're going to start off by doing some keyframes here, and then we're going to have it morph into the second shape and then the third. And we should be able to just copy and paste the first set of keyframes that we do onto the other pieces of artwork. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is we're going to bring the scrubbing tool forward a little bit. We need some time for the viewer to recognize the circle shape before they can see it morphing, right? They need a second to realize, oh, this is the shape. And then it's going to spin and shrink and pop back up and be a different shape. So again, we're not really morphing anything, but it's going to look like it is through the visual illusion of movement, right? Okay, so for this one, we're going to be toggling back and forth between rotation and scale. So let's go ahead and do scale first. So yeah, right about here maybe. We're going to toggle on the clock for scale. And then we're going to move a little bit down the timeline. And I basically want it to be 0. All right. So scale is 0. What we're also going to do, hit the R key. We're going to start a rotation animation here. And I actually need to see where the other keyframe drops. So I'm going to come over here and hit U. So I can see where it ended here. And we want a lot of rotations because this is going to be a fast eye, and it's an optical illusion, right? So I'm going to hit like 8 rotations. So it's moving pretty fast. So let's play that back. Again, for you, I have this on full resolution so you all can see what's going on really well, but you can certainly have your playback a little bit lower. In fact, let me see if I can make this a little bigger. I will just go over here and hit fit. Okay. All right, so we have our rotation and it shrinks down to nothing. Okay, so now that we have our first piece at a certain size, shrinking to nothing, we need to have the next shape go ahead and pop up here. So I'm going to toggle down to Artwork 2. I am going to take the scale and rotation keyframes and marquee select those. I'm going to copy them, and then I'm going to choose the next layer down, and I'm going to Command or Control V, and it's pasted them on here. But the visibility is off right now, so you can't actually see it. So come on over to this layer, and the visibility is on, and then the problem that you see is that it's doing the same thing. It's starting big and going to small. Starting big and going to small. So all I need to do is just reverse these. So I'm going to go ahead and drag those keyframes there, drag these ones forward, and then make sure that these two line up. So let's see how that's looking. Well, that pyramid doesn't spin very well, and it's because of the anchor point, I think. So let's go ahead and have that at full size. I'm going to choose the anchor point here for it. I'm going to drag it to what appears. Well, no, that is the center. It's just the very nature of the shape being wider on the bottom. Let's see if having it out, the anchor point a little smaller, it does help. Okay, that's helpful. All right, so we have circle, it shrinks down. We come into pyramid, and the pyramid's gonna stay for a bit. All right, so now we need this to shrink back down and then have the final shape appear. So since we start at nothing and then grow, we need this to stay for just a minute so that the viewer has time to register that this is a pyramid. So we're going to take these keyframes because this is the last animation behavior we told it to do. We're going to take these points, copy, and paste those down the timeline a little bit. And then we're going to take these ones, which are the shrinking. We're going to copy and paste that down the timeline a little bit. So disappear, morphs into that. We get a second to register it, spins away, and now we're going to do our third shape. So we want our third shape to start with these smaller keyframes here. So I'm going to go ahead and select those and copy them, even though we just pasted them. I guess I could have. They're still on the clipboard. All right, now we're gonna select this one. Now I'm gonna go ahead and paste those keyframes on this particular layer. If we click on this layer and hit our U key, we'll see the keyframes appearing, whoops, down here. And then I need to take keyframes from the large animation command, and then paste those. Whoops, I had the wrong layer selected. Paste those on the third layer. And so this one is also behaving a little bit funny. So let's take a look at where the anchor point is on this particular layer. So I'm going to take that anchor point and move it into the center. And I'm also going to just move the position of it so that it's a little bit more centered. So let's see how that's looking. This one, this rotation seems, I think the rotation's moving so fast that you can't really get a sense of these even moving because it's moving so fast. So what we're gonna do is stretch these all out to the end of the timeline. So with all of your layers, the 3 pieces of artwork selected, I want you to just hit U. So, and it'll toggle everything back up and then hit U again, and you'll just see the keyframes and that's it. Let's take these keyframes and marquee select them all. Hold down your Option key. We're gonna stretch these to the end. And I think we need to make an adjustment on the rotations for this last shape. So let's hover over the last keyframe for this particular shape. Let's see. Looks like it starts at 8 and then climbs down to 7. And it won't let my scrubbing tool sit right on there. So let's change this from 8 to maybe 6. And it's made another keyframe, so I'm just going to highlight the old one. And this, you can see it turning a little bit more, and I hope that makes sense because it was turning so fast that you couldn't see any movement. So let's see how that's looking. All right, so I'm going to play that back. I think that the rotation of 8 was actually a little bit too much for all of these. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to click on the keyframe for rotation here, and I'm going to highlight that 8 and just punch in a 6 instead. Let's see if that looks a little better. That actually looks a little bit better. And then it looks like for rotation on this one, it's at 7. I'm gonna go ahead and just punch in for the pyramid. I think it could even go a little slower. So I'm gonna do 5. Yeah, it's hard to tell that it's even spinning because it's rotating so much that it just keeps that same shape. So visually, that's very stagnant and that's not very exciting at all. So let's take it down even more. I'm gonna go from 5 rotations to 3 and see how that looks. And that looks much better. See how the pyramid or the triangle is changing shape over time better? And, you know, that's one of the things with motion design is you got to keep tweaking stuff until it works. And so these different shapes need different amounts of rotation so that they look the way that they should look. Okay, so now let's look at, so this rotation, it goes from 5 here, well, it's sitting at 3. 3, it goes from 3 to none. And it looks like we may be lost. Let's see here. I think I messed something up. Okay, so circle is large and then it shrinks and disappears. Pyramid comes up, turns a lot. Oh, I see. It stays for a moment still so that the viewer can register it. And then from this point, it shrinks back down. And it looks like we need to change this keyframe from 8 to 3 as well. That's the other thing about animation that I think not a lot of people realize is it's very technical and very tedious. So if you think you want to be a motion designer and you have a hard time sitting down and doing things for long periods of time on the computer, you might want to kind of think about that. Okay, so this has 6 and that movement looks good. All right, so let's recap. We see it, it shrinks down, pops up, see it, shrinks down, pops up. So these didn't actually morph, but it appears that they're morphing because they're spinning and shrinking down and popping back up. Now, the last thing that I would really like to add to these is a blurring effect. So we're going to go ahead and animate a blurring effect for each one of these. So what I want you to search for in your effects and presets, and if you don't see this panel, you can find it here, effects and presets. We're just going to type in blur. And let's see here. I'm trying to think which one would be best for this situation because I want it to blur, and a motion blur might be appropriate here. I used to use this blur called fast blur. Let's see. Let's try the CC motion blur and see if that gives us the look we're going for. I think it's not really going to give us the effect that we want. It might be that this is spinning too fast for the motion blur to even do anything. I think what I'm going to do, let's just try a smart blur and see what it does to the layer. We might just need to key all this stuff by hand. Nope. And you know, I'm thinking that these aren't working because we brought these in from the library and I did not convert them. Let me see. I think let's try maybe we can do a Gaussian. Let's try the Gaussian blur and see what that does to the layer. Okay, so that's gonna work. All right, so what I want to do is I want to be able to see all these keyframes. So I'm going to shift select, I'm going to hit my U key, and then I'm going to toggle this up and down because I need to get into the effects. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my scrubbing tool to the point of the timeline where the motion starts for the circle. I'm going to toggle on the blurriness. And I'm going to go ahead and increase the blurriness a bit. So it gives it kind of a motion blur effect. I think it should get blurrier as time goes on though, and it shouldn't start out at a blur because that's a little bit jarring. Okay, so I'm actually gonna go ahead and delete this keyframe. So what we're gonna do is once the spinning starts and the shrinking, I'm actually gonna put this blurriness at 0, and bear with me, I know this is getting a little tedious. We're gonna toggle on the blurriness at 0 in the beginning, and then as it shrinks down, the blurriness should go up. And then what we should see is that this gets blurry as it starts spinning over time. So a motion blur would be a good thing to put in this situation, but I didn't convert these to shape layers, which we've done before, but we don't need to get into for this particular tutorial. And this will actually work just fine. Okay, so it goes from not blurry to blurry. So we can take these and we can apply the same situation to the rest of the layers. So for this one, I'm gonna go ahead and apply that Gaussian blur. I'm gonna toggle down to the blurriness. So for this one, it should start off blurry and then become not blurry. So I am going to toggle the time clock on. I'm gonna make it blurry. I think we went to about 10 or so. So here's it being blurry. We're gonna get to this point and the blurriness should go away. Comes into focus. The viewer looks at the object on the screen. We come to here. Whoops. This blurriness should be at this keyframe, it should be at 0. So I'm gonna just punch it in there. Okay, we want it to be at 0 again, right about here. So I'm gonna take this keyframe, copy and paste it here, and then we go from not blurry to blurry again. So I'm just gonna grab this keyframe down here because I know it gets blurry. I'm gonna copy and I'm gonna paste that. So what we should have is blurry as it comes in, it's clear, it stays, and then it gets blurry as it goes out. And I think these could actually, for the triangle shape, be a little bit more intense. So let's see. So go ahead and make that a little bit more intense. All right, now we just need to add the blur to our third layer. So this one just comes in and stays, which makes it really easy. So here, we're gonna toggle down to Gaussian blur. We're gonna toggle on that blurriness and make it blurry to about between 10 and 15. It's gonna be blurry, but then it comes into focus right there. So let's take a look at this. You can see that the blurriness is subtle, but it makes a big difference for those coming in and out of focus for the viewer. And that's a really basic foundation of motion design, is using blurriness to make things clear and unclear. So, all right, good time to save the project. Let's go ahead and save this, and let's go ahead and add this to the Adobe Media Encoder queue. I'm going to tell this that I want it to go to the desktop and not that special folder that Media Encoder creates. I'm going to go ahead and save that and render that out. And then what you should have is a wonderful morphing, shape morphing GIF. And we probably in a perfect world could have made this looping if it were to be a GIF, but that's okay. Yeah, because it's a little bit jarring when it just changes shape right there. Anyways, so this is what you're going to turn in for this portion of the tutorial. If things didn't go perfectly with the keyframes, we did a lot of tedious, complicated keyframe work. So if things didn't go perfect, it's okay. If things aren't quite shrinking and changing size over time exactly like mine, okay? You can skip over the small stuff. The big picture is that you're understanding the basic concept and that you're able to get most of the basic animation completed, okay? All right. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.